Hello, it's me, Mr. G. Sorry, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat today, so it might sound a little scratchy, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you a bit about information ethics and professional ethics here. I'm going to provide this slideshow to whoever needs it, but I'm going to go ahead and go through some of the details here with you today. So let's take a look. First, we're going to talk about plagiarism. Plagiarism is the act of stealing or passing off the work or ideas of another as your own, as Uncle Webster says. Essentially, it's you're not giving credit to the original source. You're using something in a way that's really taking their ideas, and that is ideas, original ideas, and works, written works, pictures, all kinds of things like that, are protected by U.S. copyright laws, considered intellectual property. Some examples you might run into in the classroom: some kids putting their name on someone else's work, using someone else's ideas without giving them credit. I see that all the time. Kids not putting in a works cited page. They also like to do where they just change a couple words, but everything is still pretty much the same, including the sentence structure and whatnot. That's still plagiarism. Using images, videos, other kinds of media that haven't been given permission by the creator to use. That's the big thing right there, is permission. If you get permission, you're free to use it as is. Now, what are some of the consequences of plagiarism? Some things you might want to get across to your students. They could be in trouble for failing their assignment, for certainly, but of course, in this day and age where we push college so much, a lot of these kids don't seem to realize if they try this in college, they could get them booted right out of their university or other institute of higher learning, and they might not be able to go back. A friend of mine actually knows somebody who lost their academic scholarship for just essentially copying, pasting, and plagiarizing their work, and they got expelled from school, lost their scholarship, and they weren't allowed back. So big consequences. In the real world, you've got legal action that might become a problem, expensive fines you might have to pay out. It is definitely a big deal, and kids need to be aware of that. You're saying students will cut and paste. There are several resources you can use to check for plagiarism. Check out your library resource page. There's several there. This is one that I like. It's called duplichecker.com. Essentially, you can just write a bit of the passage, whatever those kids wrote, or you can copy and paste it if they turned into like a document to you, and then press search plagiarism, and it'll break it down, how much of it was plagiarized, what sources did it copy online. And teachers, be sure you're setting the example here. You also need to make sure you are giving credit to the resources you use. Don't just be taking things offline and passing it off like you came up with it. I know teachers are really good about that, or really bad about that. And when you're teaching your kids a site, try to push, I know different subjects have different kinds of citations, so try to let them know what kind do you want. Do you want APA, MLA, Chicago format? Usually different subjects have a different one, so let them know what they want. And there's a lot of online tools to make citation easier as well. Some of the online resources, like those academic journals that are online, a lot of times you can just press the cite button and it'll create that citation for you. Or you can go to websites like this one that's a Purdue Writing Lab, and it's got resources on all kinds of citations, so that's very helpful as well. Alright, next up is copyright. Copyright, we oftentimes think of very close relation to plagiarism, because again, essentially you are using someone's work that you do not have permission to copy, or mix it just a little bit, or share with someone else and it's not yours. That's where the whole pirating DVDs things comes in. And again, so often with this internet age, it's so easy just to take things right off the internet and not even think about it. But you do need to get permission most of the time, and certainly give credit where credit is due. Teachers are often pretty guilty of making copyright mistakes. Maybe you're making a slideshow and you're just using some pictures, or not slideshow so much, but maybe making a poster to advertise, maybe a fundraiser or something like that, and you're using a character or something that doesn't actually belong to the schools. Yeah, that's what you can get in trouble for. Copying books, workbooks, other educational materials. I see that all the time. Copy machines running, and it's copyright material. Houston ISD recently got in big trouble for copying Dynanotes. That's one of those things we use a lot in the science department. At Houston ISD, the principal at one of the schools decided, oh, we're just going to make copies of these and hand them out to all the kids as they leave. Well, Dynanotes got wind of it, found out how much money they were losing out on it, and Houston ISD has had to pay out $7 million to Dynanotes. So, don't copy copyright material. Well, that's the next section here, is how to stay out of trouble. Yeah, don't copy copyright materials, number one. Get permission. If you have permission, you can use it. Sometimes you can purchase the license, and then you can use that copyright material. There's also some kind of license like Creative Commons, which people put their ideas, their pictures, and whatnot out there for people to use for free without having to get any specific permission. Let me show you that actually right now. So here's an example of that, Creative Commons. It's just creativecommons.org, and you can go there. So you need some images. I can search for ants. And it's going to generate some pictures out of Creative Commons licenses that you can use for free without having to pay anybody or get any kind of license for it. So that's a good kind of resource to use for you and for your students. The other thing you got to look at is, are you following the tenets of fair use? Fair use, if you follow those 4 principles, then you may actually be allowed to use a small part of someone else's work without necessarily getting the permission. The first tenet here is, what's the purpose of the use? Is it for educational use? If you are trying to educate someone, you're more likely to be able to use that work, particularly if the work that you've created is transformative. You've created something new out of it to teach a lesson or whatnot. The nature of the work is something else. Typically, factual works you're much more likely to be able to use than creative works that, not a fiction fantasy that is really just someone's ideas. But if it's factual, that there's a lot more leeway in that in which you can use. Our third tenet is the amount of work. The more work, the larger the amount of that person's work that you're using, the more likely you are to be breaking that copyright. And then you also have to think about the effect of that work that you've created on the potential market for the other person. Are you taking away business from these people by sharing, by copying? Then you're likely to be in trouble. That comes back to like the pirating of DVDs and whatnot. That's the whole thing there. Alright, our third ethic thing here is right to privacy. So all public school students' information is protected by the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, aka FERPA. And that includes any kind of student information, their grades, their library records, awards, their address, any kind of personal information. You are not allowed to give out to anybody else without their parents' permission or notification for some of these. And then that right transfers to the student when they turn 18, which is interesting. 18 or go to a institute of higher learning. There are a few instances in which school officials can give out some information without parental consent. And it has to be like a school official with a legitimate educational interest. Emergency personnel that come in might need to know about that child. If it's another school that the student's transferring to, you have to be able to share those records. If there's a court order, if police are asking, some sort of lawful authority comes in, then yes, the school can share that info. Alright, next up we have challenge to library materials. So this comes in through the library in general collects a lot of different and diverse resources, and sometimes some people can disagree with something that's there. They can be offended by it. What's important to remember is that while you are free to reject something, you don't necessarily have the right to impose your values on someone else. But if you do still feel that something shouldn't be in a library, there are procedures in place that you can follow to have something done about it. Essentially, your first step is to make sure you actually read that entire book. Maybe you'll get something new out of that little smidgen of maybe sentence or something that you saw. And then talk to the librarian, see what they have to say about it. If you still want to challenge the material, the librarian can give you a copy of the Policy and Procedures Manual and give you a request for reconsideration of library material form, which you can then fill out. I think I have an example of one here. This is the one that goes to Juan Diego Academy in Mission. This is the example of their form. It's got information about the person making the request, asking why did they, what part did they have an objection to, what do they recommend be done with it, because it might not necessarily just be, I want you to take this out. Some people sometimes want things restricted. Alright, after you turn in the form, the principal will be notified of the challenge. The library advisory committee will meet, evaluate the material, and then they'll make a decision, present that, or a recommendation, not decision. A recommendation to the principal, and the principal will make the final decision on what to be done with that particular resource or material. Alright, the last thing we're going to talk about is internet. So, again, while students and staff and everyone should really have freedom of information, there are certain behaviors and content that don't belong in a school setting. Unacceptable behaviors, of course, include things like bullying or threatening or viewing obscene or lewd materials, breaking copyright law, that's coming on right back, and then vandalism of the network, like hacking into the system. All those are unacceptable behaviors. And any of the behaviors that are not acceptable can be found in an internet acceptable use policy, which is probably found in the student and or employee handbook. Generally, both students and faculty are required to sign an acceptable use agreement. It says that they will use the internet responsibly and use the computers responsibly. But I would even say that the internet ethics should extend even further. The teachers should be able to set the example and model the correct use of the computer resources to students. And to me, that actually includes social networking, although that's often not allowed at school. It's more and more part of our daily lives all the time, and it's just a matter of time before it's integrated even into school. And we're already seeing some of that with Google Classroom and whatnot. So it's important that students be taught those proper behaviors, that proper online etiquette, so they don't, bully and hurt others and whatnot. So I'm just going to end here with my works cited page. See, I'm just like I was preaching here. I'm giving some credit to where I got this information. Got quite a few resources here. Definitely didn't come up with this all on my own. Anyway, I hope you found this information useful. Check back for more videos in the future. Thank you.